Starving. Tell you one thing, I'm doing this and then I'm getting a mucky daze. Welcome back to the workshop and welcome to Test Tuesday. Just a really quick one today. Well, I'm saying quick, my videos are never quick. You'll remember a while back we did a Test Tuesday on MDF and we found out that little SilverScrews 4mm by 16mm little SilverScrews managed to get a peak load of 103.3 kilos into bog standard 18mm MDF. Well, one thing that I've always wondered is how much load can MDF really take if you kind of up the ante on the screws a little bit, not too much. So I'm just testing into bog standard Medite trade non-moisture resistant MDF. So this is kind of your, it's not budget because it's Medite and Medite make really good MDF, but it's kind of your trade level non-moisture resistant bottom of the range of Medite's range, maybe just normal MDF. So if you're not aware, when you're screwing stuff into, well, any wood really, but the tip of the screw does nothing really in terms of providing support for whatever you're screwing together. The tip is designed for kind of drilling into the piece, and it's everything beyond the tip of the screw that provides the support and the strength. So when I've been doing tests before with just little like 16mm screws into 18mm MDF, and if you imagine the first maybe 5mm of the screw is doing very little because of the way that the thread tapers off, then you can effectively say that out of the 18mm of MDF, only 11mm of it actually had screw thread doing anything. So I thought, well, what if you upped the ante to having the full 18mm of the MDF having 18mm of screw thread? So the first screw that I'm trying is a 4x30 TurboGold. So that effectively means that, well, it just a bit of the screw is popping out the other side. But there's many situations in joinery where that's absolutely fine. You know, you might have two cabinets that are together, that are back to back. Another example is things like door liners and door jambs. A lot of door liners now are made out of MDF in new builds. Mixed opinions on whether or not that's a good idea. If you're using the right type of screws and decent MDF, you'll probably never have a problem. But the thing that MDF doesn't like is screws being put in and taken out and put in and taken out and that sort of thing. But, you know, wood doesn't like that either. How many times have you had to fit bigger screws into hinges because the wood behind the hinge holes has just completely vanished? Maybe that's a test for another Test Tuesday, is how many times can you insert and remove screws from MDF before it becomes completely dysfunctional, and how does that compare to softwood? I'm giving myself more jobs to do. So the 4x30 actually got a lower result than the 4x16 SilverScrew that we tried the first time, and I am blaming that on the aggressive thread that the TurboGold screws have, and we have discussed that before. The TurboGolds have the self-drilling tip on them and a very aggressive thread pattern, and I think that's why this didn't manage quite as high a load as the tiny little SilverScrew that we had last time. Still 95 kilos, it's still more than I weigh. So then I thought, let's try a little 1" by 8 gauge screw and see what that can handle. So this is just a variant on the QuickSilver screws, Imperial again on the QuickSilver. Twin thread this time. The TurboGold is single thread. Whether or not single thread versus twin thread is making a big difference, we'd have to run separate set of tests on that. These tests today are just for fun. I'm not running the tests over and over. It's just for a bit of a laugh. So 1" by 8 gauge round head screw, and that managed 88.2 kilos, really close to the other figure. So really, I think what we're starting to see here is just around 90-95 kilos is going to be your limitation for how much load MDF can take, or how much load standard MDF can take in general. With this kind of ballpark screw size. And then I thought, right, let's really push the boat out and go for a 5x40 screw. I mean, loads of the screw is sticking out the other side, but that doesn't really matter. Again, we're talking about situations where you're wanting to get as much of the screw thread being used for support as possible, and for situations where it doesn't matter that it's sticking out the other side of the bit of wood, where it's hidden or there's like block work on the other side or something like that. And the 5x40 in standard MDF got 109.18 kilos. Not, again, amazing, but not a radical improvement from the tiny little 4x16 screw. If you see them side by side, it's amazing to think that both screws are taking a similar kind of weight. So then I thought, okay, that's standard MDF. What about moisture resistant MDF? We know moisture resistant MDF is denser and generally kind of smoother and stronger. And I'm not doing pilot holes on any of these tests, just kind of to keep things as consistent as possible. We'll maybe do a separate Test Tuesday at some point to weigh up the pros and cons of pilot holes. But for the purposes of this, I'm not bothering with pilot holes. We're going to leave as much of the material in the MDF as possible. It snapped the screw, which in itself is quite interesting because I've never had any of these types of screws snap ever. So I redid the test again, and this time used a QuickSilver screw for the supporting screw through the chain. And interestingly, that failed at 193 kilos and the screw snapped at 195 kilos. So when the screw snapped, it must have been about to fail anyway. It must have been very close to failing. So peak load of a screw, 5x40mm single thread wood screw into 18mm moisture resistant MDF, 195.4 kilograms. That's 430 pounds. So on that basis, a single screw should be able to support my weight. No problem. So I'm hoping you can see this. I've got the bracket fitted at the top there with a screw going through it. That bracket is held with a single 5x40mm screw, and then we've got the chain. This doesn't work, it's going to hurt. Whew. That worked. You've got screws in MDF, don't panic.